You don't need a luxury kitchen to prepare gourmet meals. I wanted a little on the sticky side. With a modest kitchen and some standard equipment, you can cook food that you would be proud to serve. There is my shrimp. All you need is a few helpful kitchen techniques, the ability to follow a recipe, a passion for food, and a fascination with cooking. Just follow along the rib cage. That is so good. My name is Dennis. I really do live in a mobile home, in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. I decided today that what I want to make is moussaka. That's a Greek eggplant dish because I love eggplant. But the problem with making eggplant, I don't make it often enough. The problem with cooking with eggplant is you have to find it perfect in the store, and you have to use it within 12 to 24 hours after you buy it because it's very perishable. Yeah, that's a train going by. I live near the tracks. You know you're getting a real trailer park experience in my shows. So what I want to do today is I want to make the meat sauce because that's always better the next day anyways. I'll do that today, and then tomorrow morning I'll go shopping for eggplant. And if I can find the eggplant that I want, then I'll do the vegetable part of the dish tomorrow, and we'll finish up making the moussaka. So let's get started today making the meat sauce. One of the optional ingredients for this recipe, and this recipe, by the way, comes from a restaurant trade journal. I always explain those. They're magazines that go out just to restaurants, and I like them because the recipes are designed by chefs, so I know they're going to work well. This is 2 ounces by weight, 1/2 cup, 60 grams. You need to soak these for about 30 minutes. The recipe recommends water. I say if you can use something other than water, something that has flavor to it, why not? So I'm going to use marsala. This is the end of the bottle here, so I might as well use it all. This is a sweet marsala. Not really sweet, something sugary like a dessert wine. But I'm going to save this soaking liquid because I have to use red wine later on, and I can use this as part of my red wine. I have some fresh tomatoes here because the warehouse store always has excellent Roma tomatoes. You could, if you wanted to, use canned tomatoes. This is a 28-ounce can, which is 794 grams. There's nothing wrong with canned tomatoes. However, when I can find fresh, that's what I prefer. What I am doing in the meantime is I'm heating my oven up to 400 degrees, and I'm going to cut these in half, arrange them on a baking sheet that I have over here. You need about a pound, 454 grams. And then I'm going to roast them in the top part of the oven for probably 20 to 30 minutes. I want them tender and maybe even slightly browned. Sometimes I even put the broiler on and char them a little bit if I want a charred flavor. My tomatoes have gone into the oven now, and I thought while they're roasting I should mention something about the spice, the Moroccan spice blend that I'm going to work with. This is something called Ras el Hanout, or Hanout. I'll put the name, if I can remember, I'll put the name on the bottom of the screen for you. It supposedly means head of the class. If you get on the internet, you can find different recipes for this spice blend. I'll tell you what's in my little jar of spice here. It is 2 teaspoons each of ground ginger and ground coriander, 1.5 teaspoons each of ground cinnamon, black pepper, and turmeric, 1 1/4 teaspoons ground nutmeg, 1 teaspoon ground allspice, and finally 1/2 teaspoon ground cloves. And basically you just mix it all up, put it in the jar, store it in the cupboard, and I got to tell you, it is a very aromatic, fragrant, flowery scent to it. This could be fun to work with. So that's my spice mix. I also wanted to show you that you can buy this Ras el Hanout in the grocery store. I found this. It shares some of the same spices as that recipe that I gave you. This contains pepper, cardamom, mace, cayenne, ginger, fennel, nutmeg, allspice, cinnamon, cloves, turmeric, lavender, and dried rosebuds. So I don't know that there's one traditional classic right mix, spice blend to make Ras el Hanout, but you can make it yourself. There's recipes on the internet, and some stores do sell it. Here are my tomatoes now out of the oven. These roasted for 30 minutes, and the oven was set to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 200 degrees Celsius. I need to let these cool, and then I can chop these up for my sauce. For this recipe for the meat sauce, you need 1/2 pound each. 1/2 pound is 227 grams of lean ground beef and lean ground lamb. Rather than buying ground lamb, ground beef is easy to find, but rather than buying ground lamb, I had bought a leg of lamb and cut it down into smaller portions. So I'm just going to use 1/2 pound of lamb here that I'm going to grind up in my food processor. I don't want to reduce this down to a paste, obviously. I tried to look for a consistency that would be about the same as my ground beef. And that's it right there. My tomatoes now have cooled, so I'm just going to crush these up with my hands. You don't need to be too fussy. I don't need to do these in a food processor. I've got a large skillet here heating on the stove, into which I'm going to put a couple of tablespoons of what I call cooking olive oil. This is just regular pure olive oil for frying, for sauteing. I'm going to break my meat up here and just saute this until this is lightly browned. You need a large onion, which is 10 to 12 ounces. That's about 285 to 340 grams. I cut the onion in half again, and then without cutting all the way through, just cutting part way through most of the way, leave the root end on because that will hold everything together. Slice down through again. By slicing down toward the cutting board rather than toward your fingers, you're much less likely to hurt yourself. And then cut across into, this is a fairly fine dice, which I want for this recipe. I have the other half of the onion to do, and then we'll be ready to saute onions. And I just want to saute these 8 to 10 minutes, just until they're tender and translucent. I don't need to caramelize these or brown these. I'm going to reduce my heat now down to medium and just lightly saute these until they're cooked. My onions now are tender and translucent, very little browning there, so that's good. I want to add a couple of cloves of garlic. These are fairly good sized cloves, so 2 should be enough. You can use 3 or 4 if you have smaller ones. And then I want to stir that in and cook that for less than a minute. About a minute should be enough to cook that garlic. All right, now I want to add about a cup of red wine. Any red wine will do. Dry. I did capture some of the marsala from those soaking currants. And now what I want to do is I want to bring the heat up, bring this to a boil, and reduce the heat again to low, and simmer this just until it's reduced down and most of the liquid is gone. So there is my onion mixture now after the wine has been evaporated off. You can see there's still a little bit of moisture there. Now I want to add my tomatoes and any juice that's in the bowl. Stir that in, bring this up to heat, and cook this for a few minutes, maybe 8 to 10 minutes, just to cook those tomatoes well. If you like a more tomato-y sauce, you can add more tomatoes at this point. Like that can of tomatoes, for example, was 28 ounces, not 16. So this is at an opportunity now to cook down a little bit. This is the meat that I cooked earlier, and by the way, I looked into the bowl under this and almost no fat at all. Just a few drops of fat went into that bowl. And that's because I used a very lean meat. So that's my meat going in. This is my Hanout. What is it called? Ras el Hanout, or however it's pronounced. I'm not even pronouncing the name correctly. Let me look on my list. Ras el Hanout. I'm putting that in now. This is 1 tablespoon of that spice blend. And then I'm going to cook this for 8 to 10 minutes. This now has been cooking for a while. I added a little moisture to this pan. And the reason why was I looked at that can of tomatoes. And the tomatoes were packed in a puree and a tomato juice, which would have added more moisture when the tomatoes went in. So to compensate for that, I added a little bit, maybe half a cup of tomato puree. Now here are my currants, and I'm not going to add all of these. Why not? They're good. I've been nibbling at them a little bit. They've taken on the flavor of that marsala that they were soaking in. Okay, that's stirred in. What I want to do, I've got my red handled tasting spoon out. The way I always use that is I put food in the spoon and then put it in my mouth. The spoon doesn't go into the food. And as expected, that is going to need some salt. So a good pinch or two of salt. Stir that in. So I'm going to cook this for a few minutes with the currants in there. And then that's my meat sauce. That's done. I can turn my heat off, let that cool, package it up, put it away. Tomorrow I'll be ready to use it to assemble my moussaka. It's the following day now. I'm ready to start working with my vegetables. I went shopping this morning and I bought some eggplant. There's some tricks to buying eggplant so that you get properly ripe eggplant. One is, look at the top. It should be green. If it's all brown, it's an older eggplant. You also want to look at the color. The eggplant should be smooth and the color should be so purple that it's almost black. You can almost not see any purple in there. You also want to lightly feel the eggplant. Kind of squeeze it all over. If you find a big mushy spot, that's a bruise, and the problem with those bruises is they tend to go all the way inside, and a lot of the eggplant will be brown inside. So I always give them a nice little squeeze, and if they seem firm, the way I like to describe it is if you squeeze the back of your hand, there's firmness under the skin. But if you squeeze this tissue between your thumb knuckle and your first knuckle, your index knuckle, it's soft and mushy there. If your eggplant feels like that, it's bruised and it's going to be brown inside. You want it to be firm under the skin. Now, to peel or not to peel. I love this debate because some people are adamant. They will fight to the death to defend their position that you should always peel an eggplant before you cook it. And there are some people that are equally insistent that you should always leave the skin on. I don't care what you do. Whatever works for you, whatever you like best, do it that way. My mom always left the skin on. I leave the skin on because I think it makes a nice contrast. It adds some color to the dish. So I leave the skin on, but do whatever works best for you. I'm going to slice my eggplant nice and clean and white inside. About 3/8 of an inch. That's about 1 centimeter. I'm doing kind of thick slices because I like eggplant. I love eggplant and I want to be able to taste it. I've got some salt here. This is another thing that some people have issues with. I don't know whether it's an urban myth or not, but a lot of people say salt your eggplant, and I always do, and let it sit salted for about an hour. What I find by salting eggplant is that eggplant has, some people say, a bitterness to it. Some say the bitterness is in the skin. But what I find with eggplant, and I don't know whether this is because it's not ripe enough, but I find that some eggplant has a bit of a sting to it. It has a bit of a bite, I call it. It stings the tongue slightly. And by salting it, I get rid of that sting. It's smoother, has a more delicate flavor. Okay, so I have my other eggplant to do. I actually bought 3. I always buy 1 extra because I never know when I'm going to run into an eggplant that I can't use. So I have the rest of my eggplant to slice and salt, and then I'll be ready to move on to the bechamel sauce. I have a medium saucepan here, heating on the stove over medium-low heat. I'm adding 3 tablespoons of butter. This is just regular whole butter. And then 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. And I want to stir this and cook this, just to cook that flour so I get rid of the raw flour flavor. I'm going to cook this for a minute or 2. Okay, this has been cooking now for a couple of minutes. I'm going to turn the heat off and I'm going to set this aside. This pan retains a lot of heat, so I'm going to continue stirring until I can see that butter is no longer bubbling. I'm going to set this aside to cool because I need to add the nutmeg and white pepper. But if I do it when it's cool, it's less likely to form lumps. My flour and butter now has had a chance to cool. So I'm going to be adding 1/2 teaspoon each of white pepper and nutmeg and get that blended in. See how smoothly that blends in? Beautiful. It's off the heat still. So I'm adding first 1.5 cups. That's 355 milliliters of milk. In my case, I'm using half and half. I'm also going to add 1.5 cups of heavy cream. Now I can bring my heat on. I set my heat at medium. And I'm going to heat this up until it starts to boil. Then I'm going to reduce the heat to low. And stirring this constantly, I'm going to simmer this for 10 minutes. I just turned the heat off under this. You can see how smooth that is. See how that coats that spatula? That's a beautiful bechamel. Now, this will form a skin very quickly. So what I'm going to do is put some plastic wrap on there, and then I'm just going to push it down carefully. That's hot. So that it just comes into contact with the top of that bechamel. I have since drained and rinsed all that eggplant in plenty of cold, fresh water to get rid of as much salt as I could. And then I placed it in a colander and let it all drip. And then I moved it over 2 layers of paper towel so it has a chance to dry out a little bit before it fries. I've got some russet potatoes here that I'm starting to peel, and I'm going to slice these up. You need about 4 to 5 of these potatoes, 4 pounds, 1.8 kilograms. And I'm going to slice these a little bit thinner than I did the eggplant, maybe 1/4 inch, a little less than 1 centimeter. This is half of my sliced potatoes here. I know from making French fries that potatoes will fry better if they're cooked twice. You do an early pre-cook. You partially cook them, let them cool down, and then you finish cooking them in the frying process. I'm going to do the pre-cooking in the microwave. So I've got some olive oil here. You can use extra virgin or you can use pure olive oil. It's not going to matter at this point. And then you want to just turn them. Try to get them all evenly coated with oil. Get them distributed in this bowl, and then I'm going to put this in the microwave, and I'm going to cook these for about 3 to 4 minutes in the microwave, and then I'm going to turn them and cook them for an additional 3 to 4 minutes, transfer them out to let them cool, and then I'll do my second batch of potatoes. I'm heating a large skillet on the stove, and I'm going to put a good amount of safflower oil in there. I'm using safflower oil because it has a very high smoke point. And I should be able to fry these potatoes at a very high temperature. And I'm going to put my potatoes in there, single layer at a time. And I'm going to fry these until they're golden brown. Turn them over. Fry them until they're golden on the other side. Here's my first batch of potatoes, just lightly browned. And I'm going to start layering these, they're still hot, inside my pan here to cover the bottom, and I'm going to overlap them a little bit. While my potatoes are frying, I'm going to cut up some chilies here. I have 4 Anaheim chilies. These come out to a total of about 10 ounces, 283 grams each. And I'm just going to slice these right down the side, avoiding the seeds inside. These are optional, by the way. Most of the recipes I looked at didn't use chilies, but the one restaurant recipe did, and I thought, oh, it's worth a try. Let me see what they're like. So I'm going to fry these up when the potatoes are done, and just fry these until they're tender. I'm not sure how many chilies I need, because that was one of the issues I had with the recipe, is it didn't mention chilies in the list of ingredients, but it mentioned them in the MOP, the method of preparation. I'm ready to start frying my eggplant now. Like the potatoes, you want to put in just enough to fill the bottom of the skillet, and then fry them until they're lightly browned on both sides. I filled the bottom of my springform pan with potatoes. I'm not sure how I feel about the peppers. They are optional. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in only one part. I'm going to use very few, just those maybe right there. And then what I'll do is I'll taste this, and I'll see what they taste like, and then depending upon whether I like it or not, I'll comment on it when I write the recipe and put it on my website. Going to add a couple of layers of eggplant to my moussaka. Whew, those are hot. Because I just think the flavor of eggplant is so good. While I'm waiting for the last of my eggplant now to drain, it's all fried. I'm going to return back to my Béchamel. And what I have here is about half a cup, 128 grams of Greek-style yogurt. And I want to just blend that in to my Béchamel. Oh, I love the looks of that Béchamel. There, that looks good and smooth. That should be fine. This is the last of my eggplant. I'm going to put the smaller pieces in the middle here. These larger pieces on the outside. Again, I'm doing 2 layers of eggplant because I love eggplant so much. And this is the meat sauce that I made yesterday. So I want to just spoon that over the top and just spread it around. I am in the meantime heating my oven up to, there it is, 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And what is that? That's 177 degrees Celsius. Okay, there's the last of the meat sauce in there. Distribute that around nicely. Make sure the top is all covered. Beautiful. And I wanted to mention too, when I was frying that eggplant absorbs a lot of oil. So you probably have to add oil to the pan periodically as you're frying the eggplant. In which case, I always use olive oil. Frying olive oil, not extra virgin. Because if it's going to absorb oil, let it absorb a flavorful oil. Now this is my bechamel. And I want to just spoon some of that over the top. I'm not going to use all of this bowl because I want some of this to use as a garnish when I serve. I'm going to swirl this a little bit because that'll bring up some of the sauce and give me a little bit more color. And then I have here a couple, 3 tablespoons of shredded Romano cheese. I'm using Romano. You can use Parmesan. Other cheeses that might be good could be Asiago. Any kind of a dry cheese with a nice rich flavor to it. There is my finished moussaka. That is now ready to go into the oven. Here it is, fresh out of the oven. This baked for 25 minutes. I started to see bubbling around the edges. And then I put this under the broiler for maybe a minute or two just to get a little bit of browning on top. I have to let this rest now for 10 minutes and then we'll be ready to serve and see what it tastes like. All right, let's see what this looks like now. Open my springform pan. There it is. It's looking beautiful. I'm going to cut a corner section of this and lift it off and then see what it tastes like. Okay, got a spatula right here. How does that look? Beautiful. And then, finally, let's move this out of the way and bring this in. I did save some of my bechamel for a little bit of extra draping. For tasting. All right. Can't wait to see what my moussaka tastes like. I've never made this before, so this is exciting for me. You can definitely taste the eggplant. You can taste the meat sauce, but it's mild. You can taste that bechamel. It's like a perfect blend or a perfect balance of flavors. That is really good. So excuse me, I'm going to go enjoy my moussaka. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.